non-traditional breed. I'm also a certified nose work instructor who has been certified since 2011. I'm a CPE Scentwork judge and an AKC judge and a NACSW ORT CON judge. And I've also been instructing teams since 2011.
I'm Monique Gangaman. I'm in the Chicagoland area by Wisconsin predominantly. I am a CPE judge and an ASCA judge. I've been in this scent work world, if you will, probably for 10 plus years. And I say scent work world because I also did barn hunt. And then I've been competing in NACSW, AKC, and CPE with multiple dogs. My non-traditional dog is a Siberian Husky, and then my others are more traditional that you've seen, which are Aussies and a Border Collie puppy. I've been training teams probably since 2013, 2014, and predominantly started in barn hunt and then shifted over to doing scent detection.
Oh, and I'd like to add, I'm in the Maryland area, DC metro area.
All right, I'm posting this on the Texas site. The link, it's actually going to be in the comments for those folks that are tuning in. There's actually a few questions there. It looks like there might have been a little bit of lag, so unfortunately we may have missed Carolyn's whole speech about her experience. But we are live nonetheless, and this is streaming through 3 platforms. We have it on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, so it should give us the opportunity to have some really good input. Let's see here. Let's see if I can get this. All right, and the comments should be live, but I'm going to go ahead and just start going down the list of questions because there were some really good questions. And the one thing I do like about her group, Scentwork Texas, is there is a very active group of folks that like to have open discussions. And to me, that's the best part about this is if somebody goes on a forum, and like I said, that's why we started All Things Scent Work. And somebody says, hey, I'm having problem with my dog doing this. Somebody can go on there and say, well, I did this, this, and this, and it helped my dog. And then somebody else can say, hey, well, we did this. So, if you have feedback from multiple people, and like we said earlier before we turn this on, dog training is not a cookie cutter approach. So the more tools we have in our toolbox, the better off we're going to be. So I'm going to start with Gail. She wrote in there, she says, hi, Jeremy. I'm curious on your thoughts about teaching a dog to sort through the puzzle of a close convergence that we might see in detective. How might handlers recognize their dog is not working the found hide, but instead working a convergence? Lastly, how do you start newer teams with this challenge? So, do you want to just, we'll just kind of go around the room and let's talk about that?
Who's starting?
Whoever would like to, if you want to start.
Nobody wants to go first?
I mean, I can go first if you want me to.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So my big thing currently for people that are competing in master and detective is having a very clean reinforcement and restart behavior. So what that means is that when your dog finds a hide, I want you to reinforce heavily and as minimal movement as you can do, restart your dog from that point. So I call that reinforcement and reset. And what that means is that your dog should immediately begin working from that reinforcement point. And if there's a close converging hide, they should be able to find that immediately from that point because there's no input from you. You're not, casting them out. You're not moving. You're just literally from that hide that they have already found, reinforcing and resetting your dog from that point. And that is how I teach my teams to basically be able to work through close converging.
All right. So, question for you, because people will ask when you reinforce your dog at odor at higher levels, because I get looks when I tell people how I do it. Um, are you utilizing their primary reward, say food?
Yes, absolutely. I
Okay.
absolutely use a primary reinforcement. And honestly, depending on the dog, I sometimes use their toy reward as well. But there's minimal movement from source. So if the dog requires a toy reward at source, we're not kind of moving around a lot.
Mhm.
We're just
Right.
kind of staying close to source and then kind of resetting. So outing the dog at that point and resetting and giving the search cue from that point. So there's a lot of very still and calm resetting to search again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, and this is why I like these conversations because the way I do it and the way you do it are different. However, depending that's also going to depend on the dog.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
I tend to be the guy that shows up with the over the top high drive crazy dogs. So when we talk about the reward system, early on, I talked about verbal, touch, food, toy, right? That's what we did in obedience. That's what I'm going to do in detection. So if I'm going into masters or higher, and I know there's multiple hides, one, just like you said, my dog's going to be working independently away from me with minimal input. But I also know that in my dog's brain, that the expectation of the reward is spiking dopamine, right? So
Yep.
when my dog finds that first hide, I am going to reinforce it, but I'm just going to do a verbal reinforcer of mine. Good boy, find another, right? And he goes right to the next one. I'm going to, because I do use toy reward, I use toy for the very last one or when I think I found the last one. And when we call finish, obviously, then I'm going to mark and reward and give the game its source. So, I like that. That's the thing I like is that you get, multiple aspects of hey, this is how she does it, and this is how he
Absolutely.
does it. But it also should be said, you have basically a non-traditional dog when it comes to,
Exactly.
and I have German shepherds where, the some of them will work for all day long for a piece of food, right? But I don't like to. It's just like you said. I don't want to be in that area a whole lot
Yep.
because people need to understand the more we walk around that area, the more we affect the movement of that odor.
Yep.
So I do early on like a dog that is confident and independent, but I will do a lower value reward and kick them onto the next one because in that their mind they're working for that ultimate in their brain, which like I said, my dog is a toy reward dog, right? So um, they know that that game is coming, and the only time, just like Randy said last time, the only time that game happens is when that dog gets to source. So that's kind of how we vary that. Now I do know that she asked like, how would you start young dogs on this challenge? So does anybody want
It
to
really
talk?
depends on the dog. I mean,
Yeah.
so for dogs that are kind of, I mean, I run a French bulldog who is like zero toy, 100% food, and like the search is not super high on his, priority list. So I do a lot of reinforcement at that hide and
Hmm.
then do I have a close hide available for that dog to go to, and I heavily reinforce for that dog moving on to the next hide. Um, for a dog that is a lower drive dog. So
Yeah.
I would set up in training like we have a hide, we get really really paid and then we reset and there's another hide in close proximity that that dog can find and then get paid again for
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So early on, if I'm starting a young dog, and I'll just go with kind of like the box protocols. We'll just say that we're doing this in like a container setup, right?
Right.
I will be the same way in that early on. I'm going to jackpot. basically, uh, multiple rewards there at source, and then give the dog the verbal to go to the next one. But I am laying the foundation to where that verbal reinforcement means something. So later on, I just, good boy, find another. Good girl, find another. And they're like, oh, because they know at the end of that, whether it is food or toy, they know that payout's coming. And if we do it correctly, then their dopamine spiking through the whole search. I had a lady several months ago. Her dog, its older dog, got stressed, wouldn't even take food. She's like, my dog won't even take food. It's dropping food. I'm afraid to drop food in the search area. What should I do? I said, just run the search without the food and use verbal reinforcement. And when you find the last one, I said, if you're afraid of it dropping food, do an market and reward it when you exit the search area. And then maybe that'll be enough to get you through and go to the next one. And she said, I wish I thought about that last year at the NACSW trial. And I said, well, we have to remember that studies have shown that dopamine isn't highest when we give the reward. It's highest with the anticipation of the reward when they do studies.
Exactly.
So we forget that. We think that the greatest satisfaction in a dog's brain is when they get the treats. But we have to look at the science as a whole. Same thing for us. When we walk into a casino, how are we when we first walk in there? The lights are going, the music's going, and we're like, hey, this is gonna be our night. This is gonna be our night. Big thing, big thing. And you see the slot machines, big money, ding, 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 ding. And we think, hey man, this is great. Right? And then what happens? We win a little bit, and then we go on this long spell where we're losing our money. And then about the time we get to where we're going to leave, we push the button or pull the handle, and it gives us a little bit. And what do? I'm going to sit here and I'm going to win my money back and then some. So I think sometimes people think that the dog lives and breathes by the food or the toy, but there's a lot of times we can motivate them very heavily with just verbal reinforcement and them understanding, because those dogs, when they get to masters or higher up in whatever organization, they know it's coming, they know the game, and
And
if
I
it's
mean,
a
I
very
really
long,
think that speaks to all of the people on this call's ability to reach each individual dog at where they're at,
yeah,
because every dog is going to be a slightly bit different. I mean,
yeah,
I have to, I want to give you an update on Mallory, the Malinois that, you worked with in our last broadcast.
yes,
She is doing fantastic.
nice,
She is doing amazing with not having a very aggressive reward
good,
alert. And so that was you meeting the dog where she needed to be at. And that's something that we all need to understand is meeting the dog where they're at. And she's done amazing. And
nice.
your help has been, very instrumental in getting her to be a non-aggressive alert dog.
Well, I'd love to hear that, and that's one of the things that really kind of where I gained a lot of experience early on. Was my first two dogs that I ran professionally were aggressive alert dogs, and then all of a sudden everybody decided they didn't want those anymore. So we had people like, how do we switch over? How do we switch over? So that's how I got actually introduced into the canine BSD system. Is you had a heavy high density polyethylene box, and we allowed that dog to go through an extinction burst, and we were able to mark and reward at source. But with the remote, the dog learned very quickly that this behavior gets him paid, and he could scratch all day long because it's a 25-pound box. He wasn't going to tear anything up, right? But that makes me happy. I love hearing success
Yeah.
stories. I love it.
And honestly, that is a dog who absolutely will continue to work for a verbal reward and a good job, let's move on. And I'm really grateful that you worked with her and explained that to her, because they're doing amazing, honestly.
Great, great. So it's a high drive dog's a double edged sword.
Yes.
Uh, they're fun, and and challenging. And early on at the lower levels, you can have some struggles because you have a dog comes out like a bull in a china shop, and if you're looking at like a novice run with just 10 boxes, you know, that that shepherd I had, it would pace the area twice before it settled in, and then but then here's what happens: you get up to the higher levels where you have longer searches, bigger rooms, and it becomes an asset. And you know, patience is a virtue, and that's the hardest part of dog training is patience. So I'm glad she's having some success. Um, Carolyn, Monique, do either one of you want to talk on this any?
Sure. So each week I coach anywhere from 30 to 35 teams. So all kinds of breeds, all kinds of arousal levels, all kinds of drives, backgrounds, participated in sports, handlers with different backgrounds. So it's a game of how can we maximize the team and so looking back at Gail's question, my lab runs fast, really fast. So it's an asset in places like a Master Nationals. We did great. But in like detective, she will speed past a converts, partly because I think to diagnose it, I think part of it is with NSCSW, we're dealing with the cocktail. In any 10, it can be a cocktail of odor. So when she comes by and grabs a hide and leaves, I think oftentimes, like in detective, if it's a very tight convergence, she thinks that's one hide. And so I've been burned by that a lot. So what I've started to do with her, she's 4, is we'll go by one direction, grab the hide, and my handler and / judge brain goes, that looks like a possible setup for a twin hide, a triangle, some kind of convergence. We will reverse direction and approach it from the other direction.
Yeah.
And that's just, is there a possibility there can be a convergence? Then I'm going to flip her around and run her the other way.
Yeah.
And she's going to run into that convergence the other way. And that's worked for me. And I think it works well for the dogs who want to search faster. But in my classes, we've got dogs of all speeds. So it's a game of how fast does this dog move? Okay, this is the method that you use. I have other dogs that move slower and are very thoughtful. They can hit a hide, walk, hit the convergence, and everything's fine. But those are dogs that are not typically moving fast in searches at all, but that's their strength. Their strength is found to counter the convergences. Even the 3-point, the triangles, they do great, or the high-lows. They do great because they're not moving so fast. And I don't want to diminish. I don't want to diminish drive. I don't to knock down arousal necessarily. So instead, we coach different techniques for the dog in front of us, not cookie cutter. We're all going to do convergences this way. And then the second part of Gail's question, she said, how do you recognize your dog is not working the found hide, but instead working a convergence? I don't worry about it. I don't have time to worry about it in a search. If I worry about that or consider that, time is ticking. And sadly, we're still a time sport. So instead, I will use that time to reverse my direction. And if there's something there, we get it. And if not, we're out of there. And when she talks about the names, I start this pretty much not in foundations and not the level right after that, but right after that. I start it pretty early. So they're encountering wide convergences pretty early in their career. It's not something we wait to train to when we need it. It's presented early. And I think showing a dog that early and building the dog that you're going to need in 3 or 4 years now, way better than teaching it when you need it.
Yeah, slow and steady wins the race.
Yep. And I kind of agree with most of the comments that, were described. The other thing I would say is, are you doing this on or off leash, right? Because you can control that acceleration, right? If you're on leash, versus if you're off leash, it's completely independent, right? And what I've noticed, I do a lot of what Lori described, and I think Caroline, you described this as well, is varying out the different types of reward, right? So
Yeah.
if I'm intentionally trying to teach the convergent, I will actually feed more, right?
Yep.
Because I want them to be thinking about that entire environment as I'm feeding them. And then what, like you said, Lori, proceed to then slowly stand up, or just at that point tell them to go find another after I'm done feeding them. And hopefully at that point they've connected the dots during that feeding process of where that other hide could be,
Yep.
right? And then two, if I have the leash, I have the ability to put slight pressure to slow a fast dog down, like what Caroline's describing, so that all of those points connect the dots so that they can then acknowledge it. And once they start acknowledging it on their own without the assistance, if you needed to put that in there, right? Which most cases, my dogs are running off leash 99.9% of the time. But if I needed to create that, like for instance, a threshold hide, one thing I knew about Leah, my black tri that you see often in the trials, right? Or even some of the students I teach, specifically labs, ironically, they will blow past a threshold hide simply because that's how they work. They're going out
Mhm.
and then back
Mhm.
in, right?
Yep.
Yep.
But if I learned that if I can put Leah on a leash, instead of sending her off independently immediately, and train that slow progression with the leash, she'll
Mhm.
start to hit the threshold instantaneously to a point now I don't have to have that leash pressure even in a trial anymore because she's already caught it before we've walked into the room. So, yep.
Right. Another thing we do for thresholds here is I try to have my teams understand that the start line is only for the timer. It's not for
Yep.
you. It is not for anybody but the person with the stopwatch. And so I almost forbid them to stand at the start line with a dog. We don't do it. We start way, way back. And something I learned from someone that I respect a lot, Jason Hang, is it's okay to search the wall that is bounds leading up to the start line.
Yeah.
And
No,
you're not going to
definitely.
miss your threshold. And
Absolutely.
the
I mean, I think
other part, just reward history at threshold hides. If you can get enough of those in and make it worth the dog's time to search the threshold, like just
Mhm.
present that over and over and over.
Yeah.
And you'll finally hit the threshold of reward events where the dog says, okay, it's worth it to hang out by these cones or this tape to see what might be up here.
I mean, all of that I think absolutely plays into your threshold routine, and how you make that rewarding is with hide placement, right? You make
Right.
hides, you have threshold hides that are placed, within a reasonable threshold, and reward heavily. I think the problem comes with forcing our dogs to search the threshold, often comes at a detriment to the team.
Yep.
So I think it's thresholds are really important, especially at the higher levels when you may not be able to come back to search the thresholds, but you can't force it. You literally
No.
cannot force that behavior. It needs to be a very thoughtful placement of hides and a very thoughtful reinforcement of threshold behavior. Because if we hold a dog at the threshold who does not want to be held there, we're not creating any. It's not helpful at that point, even if there's a hide there. So it very needs to be approached in a very thoughtful manner. um, what is the dog's arousal? What is the dog's experience? And how do we place hides to get the dog to be the most successful at thresholds? And sometimes it's literally just letting the dog go all the way out to the end of. I personally start my dog on leash in detective because I know I have a small dog who is not super motivated. who will not have the opportunity to come back to the threshold. So I let my dog go all the way out to the end of their leash at a threshold, and I non-confrontationally uh, kind of force them to search the quote unquote threshold area. With a lot of really, really high drive dogs, I think this needs to be taken into consideration because the dog does not want to be forced into searching a threshold. And how do you get them to search the threshold when there is a chance that you will not be able to come back and search that area? And Monique can relate to that.
Yes, I got a very opinionated
Well,
voice in the back
and
there.
I know that you have a lot of opinions on that, so
Yeah.
I'd really like to hear you weigh in on this.
Oh yeah. Well, and that's and I mean, like with my husky, thankfully not high drive, right? So for her, she was either going to get it by her choice or not. And that was going to be the end of that story because there was no, even if you were holding her at the end of the leash as an example, that would never go with her. She was either going to choose it or not.
Yeah,
Now with my Aussie, she's not exactly high drive like probably what Jeremy is referring to. In fact, I think I have one Aussie that is probably more high drive to that point where she likes stirring up odor and that's how she gets into odor. And I have plenty of teams that are preferably that way, that they treat odor like prey and they try to spin it up so that then they can get into it. Because we also work through, as far as like from a threshold perspective, is your dog more going downwind or upwind as well, right? I have Leah who prefers to kind of chase right into it. I've got Sylvie that likes to come at it from behind, right? So again, that concept of, if the dog prefers to come at it from behind, do you want to play this leash game,
right.
right? Because again,
Exactly.
right, and you've got a lot of the labs that are like that too. They would prefer, to your point, to go all the way to the back end and then work themselves forward, right? Because they do that whole concept of going out and coming back in with the find that they find when they're in the hunting mode, right? Well, then you've got the Aussies that are more like wanting to do an outrun, right? And is it going to be a close outrun, or is it going to be a more like the border collie where it's
Right.
very, very, wide? So again, to your point, I'm playing it with that leash. Can the dog withstand that? And is it, to your point, a higher level team or a younger team? Because the more that you're putting pressure on something like a leash for a young team, the more they're going to probably not want to do things independently, right? Where a team that has been already kind of put through its paces, then being able to put that little bit of a pressure or waiting for the edge of the leash, the combination of that might not be as detrimental to that detective or master level dog at that point. So yeah, no, I played around with this, and again, kind of like what even all of you have said, it's dog
Yes. I mean,
dependent, right?
like I honestly, this is something that like plagues me at night. So I value your opinion.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And I think you're spot on in the sense of it's very much dog dependent, right? Like, can they handle the pressure, or can they handle the independence, right? Of being able to determine this. And then what are you willing? I think even Carolyn kind of said this. Are you willing to just accept the dog for what it is? And then like she talked about going from one direction and then knowing the dog. So you just turn to go the other direction. And at the end of the day, if they left the hide, they left the hide, and then it's a learning for next time, right?
Right.
The other thing I commonly say to my teams, no matter how long they've been in, if you know where the hides are or not, I want you as a team to tell me when your dog gets into odor. And I don't mean source.
Yeah,
What,
absolutely.
right? Because whether it's a threshold, whether it's a convergent problem, can you effectively say what your dog is thinking before they've even hit the odor? Did they go like this as they walk past the threshold? When it came down to the convergence, were they suddenly making a decision of which one they wanted to choose from and finally made a choice? So if you read that, then kind of like what Caroline's saying, if you or combination of both, right? If you just stand up after you're done rewarding, whether it's verbal, food, whatever, if you stand up and they make the decision to go all the way to the other end of the room and you saw that behavior of question, you know you need to come back, right? So same thing with the threshold. If they went and they looked to the left but didn't commit to it, again, in your training, are they a young team? Do you want that look and that move on? Or do you want that look and you go, hey, hang on, come on, right? Because then the more you repeat that look of the line, that is then going to transfer to a faster decision making versus a blast pie.
Absolutely.
I know we kind of varied into multiple different topics away from the
Well,
question.
this
But
is
yeah.
kind of like brought up a lot of things for me is questions that I've had. So
No, perfect.
so I guess this segues into one of the biggest questions that I've had recently. And I've seen this a lot with a lot of dogs that have been doing detective level searches, and not a lot of training, but trialing at the detective level. The dogs are quote unquote, what I consider walking hides that are not difficult, acknowledging a hide and walking that hide because they know there are other hides that will be reinforced.
Mm.
And so dogs are missing detective cues for one hide, because the dog acknowledges a hide and says, well, I don't need to work this out because I know there are other reinforcement opportunities available. How do you guys work with that and acknowledge that?
So is this the handler recognizes if the dog's walking the hide or not?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. So I have seen it with dogs that have come in and honestly, sometimes the handler does not know that. Like, so me as a judge, I obviously know the dog has acknowledged the hide, but the dog does not necessarily, the handler does not necessarily acknowledge that the dog has acknowledged the hide. I've seen it more and more in AKC detective. I've seen it quite frequently in AKC detective because there are so many hides and there are many dogs that understand that if there's a problem to be solved, they may not need to solve that problem in order to be reinforced for another problem.
Do you think
Because
so what I just thought of is sometimes I see something like that. If my detective area is too small and too saturated with odor, meaning this is a lot to sort through because any direction I turn my nose, there's 4 or 5 hits to be found. Whereas in a larger venue and where the odor might be spread out more, it's not so overwhelming. Do you think it's a mistranslation or do you think that makes sense?
Oh,
no,
it does.
I mean, that's a valid question. So I will tell you that one of the searches that I saw, the hide was a fairly simple outside hide with not a lot of odor available. And there were several dogs that chose not to work that problem out because they knew there were other reinforcement opportunities available. So I give a lot of grace and a lot of leeway for dogs when there's a lot of odor available. But I do honestly feel personally that the AKC detective class kind of affords dogs the opportunity to say, like, I may skip this hide because I know there's other reinforcement opportunities available. And in NACSW, they are allowed to miss a hide or get a no. And in AKC at the detective level, they are not. But I think these dogs are sometimes cherry picking hides. And so I have seen teams go in and I can see an acknowledgement that there's odor, and maybe let's say 50% of the time the handler can see that also. But the dog moves on because they, for whatever reason, don't want to solve that problem. How do you work through that in training? And how do you get a dog to kind of focus on not walking hides, basically? What I call walking hides, what I call ignoring hides and not working through the problem.
So one of the things that I would ask is, do they understand when their dog is an odor? And and I say it time and time again, the folks that run, whether they've got GoPro on their head or the Ray-Ban Meta glasses are amazing. When they record their runs, they can go back and look and see from the outside looking in, oh, my dog was an odor right there. So if I'm in a trial, we'll do trial first. I know when my dog's an odor. Now, if my dog shows a little bit of interest, let's just say in the kitchen area, over by the sink, but doesn't fully commit, and we move on, then we'll go back and search the area. But I'm going to take a mental note and I'm going to come back to it, right? So, and then if I have to, I will detail that area. So, kind of like what Carolyn said earlier. I've got the same problem with my dog. Uh, if he misses it this direction, oftentimes he catches it on the way around. So if I'm running like a large area off leash, I will pay attention to where my dog spent a little bit of time, um, showed some interest, let him finish the search area, and I will go back and I will actually have him detail that area a little bit. Now, when it comes to training, like training and trialing are two different things. Whereas, I said higher up in trial, I'm going to do verbal, verbal. Let's say there's 5 hides: verbal, 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 and then toy. I'm going to reward every time on every hide in training, but we're also going to. It's the same with the police dogs as it is with our Scentwork folks. And I have gotten to a point where some of my clients that train with me, some people drive several hours away, and I'm like, hey, let's set it up to where when we do class, we'll come to you this time, or or we'll meet you at your place. So we may be in Indianapolis one week, and we may be in Paducah another week. But let's say Carolyn shows up, and I'm gonna say, all right, we're gonna use Carolyn's odor, right? Because I don't know how strong her odor is. I don't know how old her odor is. I don't know where she procured it from. So I get mine from Canine NW source. She may get hers from another area. She may have hers is NACSW strength, where the other person may have theirs as AKC. And I'm going to make sure that we take time using different hides, different strengths. Throwing out cocktails sometimes, so because if the dog can recognize the odor, and here's a prime example. We were searching at the school doing a training day. All right. Local agencies here. My dog walks by, gives a little bit of shows a little bit of interest, searches the rest of the room, goes out, goes down the hallway, finds something, goes back into the room, walks it twice. Third time, I detail it. He settles in. I open the drawer. There's the odor, mark and reward, give him fight at source. What it was is we had spent the past 3 months using DEA drugs for training, which is made in the lab, super clean, super pure. And the local officer shows up with street level drugs that has, different cutting agents in it. even though the dog recognizes, okay, yeah, there is this heroin in there. There's also this, and this. So, not to bash anybody, but depending on how odor is stored, essential oils or whatnot, how it is stored. We don't know how long it sits in storage when we purchase our little vials from places. So for me, I like to, whenever I train with people, we will switch out. This time we'll use mine, next time we'll use Carolyn's, next time we'll use Lori's, and we'll do it all venue strengths. And then we'll throw out some cocktails because the dogs need to see that picture. Um, 20 years ago, I was at a training and the guy goes, "My dog walked past 10 pounds of marijuana. How's that possible?" Well, when you get hit in the face with this overwhelming strength and you're not used to it, the dog did give a behavior change, but the dog wasn't confident enough to lock up on it. But then the dog finds like one joint in a vehicle search. You have to ask yourself, what's your training look like? And this is also why we'll refer back to the importance of a training log. That training log is going to save you time and time again. Take notes. What was, and a good training log, you can say, hey, it was so and so time of day. The temperature was this. The wind was, roughly this, and this. And you can mark out the various hides you sit. You can even list your dog's motivation. You can post in there, maybe the layout of the room. But take notes. And if you see something where your dog's struggling, take notes and continue to practice that. But in training, I'm going to reward at each hide, and I am going to, if I'm training or if I'm trialing, I like my meta glasses. I'm going to watch it because, I run blind hides, but I run known hides too. And people always want to say, run blind, run blind, run blind. Yes, that is, but it's we want to have a good balance of both, because the beauty of blind hides is in a training class, when we know where the hide is, we can watch our dog's body language going into it. So,
one more thing that I just thought of a second ago. We all know that running order matters, where you are in line. When you have a newbie volunteer, they go, all the great dogs are running at the end. Well, that's not it at all. So I wonder if the dogs that are walking the odor preferring hides that have had more traffic by them, meaning more human footsteps, more dog footsteps, more reward events, more slobber, more hair, versus the ones that have not been discovered as much. Because this is a game way.
I mean, absolutely. I don't know what the psychological aspect is of dogs who are walking hides. I do know that I have a few students who have dogs that in seminars will see absolutely deciding to not source a problem and moving on from that problem. And I can see where that has bit them in the butt with detective searches. And so I think I'm trying to come up with a way to help people understand, to work with their dog on sourcing the hide that they have acknowledged.
Yeah, and I have a student right now that I'm working with where the dog does what you say walking, I call it cataloging.
Yes.
I've got a student that literally the dog will catalog a bunch of the hides. And so how we've been kind of working on that is she needs to know where all the hides are in the class, right?
Yep.
If there are certain challenges, problems, complexities that are worse than others, we'll focus on those. We'll make sure that they're included in the search. But whether it's massive amounts of complexity or low complexity, what I have had her do at least for a while, because I personally think this is a decision making on the dog and again, that value, right?
I think this is a dog issue, honestly, Monique. This is so I like to acknowledge your fact. The dog absolutely is able to sort this. This is not a dog not being able to solve the problem. This
Yep.
is, in my opinion, the dog moving on from a problem that they are able to solve.
Yep. Well, then I would be doing exactly what I'm doing with my one student, which is they know where all the hides are. And soon as the dog is going in contact with the hide, I always say you have to beat your dog to that hide for reward, right? Because the intent of moving toward is the intent, right? So therefore you are rewarding intent, not giving me this sit or down
Yeah,
or look at me. I don't want any of that. Don't give me any of those values, right? Because what I'm trying to reward is the intent of the line, not and that is what's getting you to source, and I'm feeding you at source, right? And so
absolutely.
every single search that she runs with this dog, I have done that exact, had her do that exact point. The dog is now actually going to source where you can now test that, right? And essentially test that the dog gets that as soon as I'm there, reward is coming.
Yep.
And if you need to then build in, if you're requiring some kind of alert, you can do that. But first and
Yeah. I
foremost,
mean, I personally don't, but yeah.
yes,
So
she
as
just
soon as
needs
that
that value.
dog's nose touches it, you're rewarding right there. And that's
Yep.
actually that's one of the ways that we'll introduce thresholds, as I'll have somebody in the search area, and say it's a high drive dog, I'm giving a little bit of leash pressure as the dog's nose goes in there. As soon as it touches it, boom, we're right there with the
Yep.
reward, whether it's
Yep.
food or toy. But
Yep.
yeah, so let me see. We've got some good questions coming in. Let me. All
Thank you,
right. So,
Monique.
You're welcome, Lori.
um,
I'm always
Valerie.
happy to hear your opinion and glad to help you.
Yes, same.
So, Valerie Grant, what's the single most impactful thing a handler can do to improve their performance or their
I
Ooh,
Scentwork
that's a
trial
loaded
results?
question.
Well, I mean, my biggest thing, like I said earlier, can you tell me before the dog hits source, what point did they catch the line? What point did they catch that cone? Because one thing that's positive about an instructor, a judge, people that are watching dogs on a consistent basis, we know the exact point that they have caught that hide and that they are going to route into the hide. So you as the student doing this to yourself as well as to your fellow students, can you say when each of these individual dogs in your class, your own dog and the other dogs in the class, can you say correctly, hey, that dog caught odor, they're now going to hedge in and hit the hide? Because I can almost tell you
Absolutely.
the exact point. Yeah.
I think the biggest impactful thing that
So
you can do is to observe not only your dog but everybody else in your class and understand when that dog hits odor and when that dog acknowledges odor and how they work that forward.
Well, I think that's one of the
I got
benefits
it.
we have
Go ahead, Caroline.
is as being judges is how many
So,
hundreds of thousands of dogs do we get to observe?
I mean,
You know,
honestly,
so many.
that's a gift. I mean, it's absolutely, I 100% acknowledge that being a judge is a gift because I have been blessed with being able to watch many, many, many teams in many, many, many situations. And that has contributed to my education. Absolutely.
So at home, we concentrate on rituals. And I really try to make the point that You need a ritual in training. You don't just hang out with dogs on leashes. We crate because that's what it's going to be like at the trial. So when it's your turn, you get the dog out, you put the harness on, you put the leash on, you put the apron on, you have your food, just like the trials. That's the beginning of the ritual. Then what is your ritual in the queue line? Because we have those in class too. And then what is your ritual as you're approaching the start line? And then your reward event that you work on in class should absolutely be present in the same intensity, if not more, at the trial. And so when Valerie says the single most impactful thing a handler can do to improve their Scentwork trial results, create a ritual. I do it for the day. So what does my day look like with my competition dog? From the minute I get up on a competition day, the whole day is a ritual. So create a ritual that is beneficial to the dog, that is puts the dog first, not you first, and make sure that that ritual is in place game day. I think if a dog knows what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and that you are dependable and that the covenants that you've made with your dog will hold under pressure and that you're going to pull your load and fulfill those rituals, trialing goes way better for the dog. A new thing that I've started to do with my dog, and this leads into Allison's questions about, do dogs experience burnout? So I went from a hunt test to the Labrador Retriever Nationals to the AKC Master Nationals without going home. I did all that. And what I did every single night is find some place to take my dog hiking. We went out, and I did not ask anything from her but to be a companion to me. Absolutely zero obedience, zero anything. Just go and explore and decompress. And I think that that made a big difference in our success over the course of 2.5 weeks on the road, because it wasn't do all the things I want you to do during the day, and now you've also got to be under control in the hotel at night. There's going to be a break in there that's just for the dog to be a dog. And I think if more people did that, even though they're tired after the trialing experience, find a way for the dog to decompress before you decompress, you would see better results.
Yeah. So, and I always say that we need to be like Dexter with our ritual. You know, Dexter has his ritual, and and I will take mine as far as if
Serial
I'm
killer.
using, yeah, if I'm using a ball on a rope to reward with for detection, the only time that dog's going to see that ball on a rope is when we're doing scent work. And people think it doesn't make a difference, but it does. I can give you a prime example. Most of the dogs come over from Europe. They use a Kong because Kong's not magical. They're cheap, right? So you have a Kong on a rope. But then if you start doing obedience with a Kong on a rope and tucking that Kong underneath your arm, and you go out to do a search, and the dog sees that Kong, it may snap into a heel. Now the dog's not wrong. In the context, you spent 3 weeks playing with this dog with the Kong on the rope to do obedience. So, like for my puppy here, it's flat collar. I've got the same pouch on every time. We use the same food. I don't switch up the treats. The only time she sees those treats is for scent work. If we're going to do obedience, it's a different collar and it's different treats, right? And when we get to the line, well, as we approach the line, I give her a little bit of leash pressure, just a little bit. She starts amping up. I'll give her a bite of that treat, and I do this every time, just like Carolyn said, every time. And when she goes hiking, my thing is like frisbee. A frisbee is something that we can go out to a park. We can go, to somewhere and play and let her just free up. But just like Dexter, that ritual is very important. And it's going to be different with my food reward dogs as it is my my toy reward dogs, but everything needs to be the same every time. The only time that dog sees that ball on a rope is when we're doing scent work. No other time. No other time. So if I'm doing a toy reward, I may get the dog out. I may tease him up, let him see that toy. It goes up. Then we go to the start line. Uh, so yeah, that's very important. And absolutely, dogs do develop burnout. We see it. We hear people talk about it. Oh, my dog doesn't like this, or my dog doesn't like that. Now, oftentimes, what they're saying is not necessarily burnout, but they don't see the value in it and they don't train it, right? So, how many times do we see people? Oh, I hate buried, and then they come out. Big shocker! Your dog doesn't perform in buried. But if you never practice buried, and then never you don't see the value in it, so you're not making it fun for the dog either. You're like, oh, buried's miserable. Well, guess what, man? Your dog's going to pick up on all that. So, buried needs to be a party. Whether you like it or not, you need to fake it till you make it.
I think another thing that might help burnout is I think there's a tendency, and it bled over from the obedience people, that if the trial went bad, Monday morning I have to hit the ground and fix that problem.
Right.
And I think that's a terrible idea. For me, if I trial all weekend, I don't ask anything of my dog till Wednesday. Nothing.
Yeah, I always
Nothing
take Mondays off with my dog. Absolutely.
Nothing Monday, nothing Tuesday. And when they start acting bored again, it's time.
Yeah.
Like, it's time.
Well, frustration is a wonderful thing to motivate dogs. And that's a very good point. Sometimes when they have a few days of inactivity in that sport that they do a lot, they come out fresh. They're just like us. You're not always going to have a great day. And even if you come out to train and your dog's looking blah, just put the dog up.
Agree.
Because what's going to happen is we're going to get frustrated and we're not going to get anything accomplished. Maybe go do something else. Just go let your dog be a dog for a day. I mean, dogs are like people. They're going to have good days and bad days. I do think that the ability to, okay, so containers went horrible. The ability to go back to your car if you're crating in your car, to breathe and reset yourself mentally is also a skill that we should acquire, and come out, and because each run is a new opportunity. People get so frustrated, and I want to bring this up because our time with our dogs are very short. When I was in Springfield, we had a lady that, oh man, she had a wonderful day. And I'm like, man, this dog looks really good. And she's like, well, he's 11, 12 years old. He's going through chemo. Wonderful day. And he was working at a higher level. The next day, they didn't show up. And we got word that the dog died that morning. So, enjoy your time with your dog. Don't, if you have a run or two that doesn't go your way, it's not the end of the world, folks. Our time is very short with these dogs. And, that lady was a prime example. That dog got to have a great day doing what it loved one last time. And it just kind of hit me, the second day we're like, wow, that dog was just here doing an interior search and container search. And it looked great. It looked great. And it was physically dying of cancer and passed away the next day. So, don't take it's at the end of the day, it's a game. Don't take it's not life or death,
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
one thing is probably an unpopular opinion, and I'm probably going to catch blowback on, but I believe it, is dogs are not here to absorb our emotions. They're not here to absorb our sadness, our negativity, that kind of thing. My dogs are not therapy dogs. They're competitors. And so I make a concerted point that there's no arguing around them. There's no crying around them. There's no unloading of negative emotion around them, because that's not their job. I don't have them for that. I think when people handlers may use dogs for reasons, or a competition dog and a therapy dog. That dog carries a heavy load, and you're asking a lot of the dog on an ongoing basis. So burnout could come from a dog with a heavier load than a dog whose their whole existence is go find the hide and eat a lot of food. That's pretty easy, you know.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to your point, right, to not create that, it may be a frustrating point for you, but I have always noticed, and I'm sure you guys have as well, is when my dog and I have a bad search or a bad day, quite frankly, mass majority of the trial also has a bad search or a bad day,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
not just me, it's an environmental thing a lot of the times. And now a lot of these venues, including NACSW, allow you this opportunity to say, I came in, made this a competition. We're not connecting at a team for whatever the reason may be. Judge, tell me where these hides are because I want to have a good balance
Right.
finalization of the day. I just want to now turn this into an FEO. NQ me, whatever you got to do. I'd like my time. I paid for my time. I'm using this as a glorified sniff and go in a trial environment. And I'm just going to have a good time with my dog and teach my dog
Absolutely.
that this is the environment that I'm going to have you in, and you're going to be able to do it. And I'm going to give you the support you need at this time to make this a success. And then guess what? Then
Right.
I'm not overly emotional as well. And I'm able to like flip that
Right.
switch to focus on training instead of trialing.
Right. I think it's a good goal. I don't think my dog, of course, she's a lab. She's always happy, but she doesn't recognize when we have a bad run.
Right.
She doesn't know.
Yeah.
She does not know it because she gets food at odor. Then when I leave the search area, it's the ball and a tug. I don't care how the search went. I don't care if we totally blew it. She still gets that toy after the search because I'm investing in the next search, whether that be a training search or a trialing search. I don't think she's ever recognized that we've blown it as a team. She doesn't know. And if I can get that point across to the people I coach, think about the dog's perception of the sport, how much better it's going to be than mom is disappointed, my handler's disappointed, and them taking on that burden during the trial setting or even the training setting.
All right. So Foster has a question. Says, how sanitary are you with sitting hides? Do you or should you use gloves to sit hides in practice? Do you think it's if the same person sits the hides that a dog learns the scent of the hide sitter and searches for them as opposed to the odor?
I am by far not clean and things, and I do that intentionally because I think we talked about this once before. And I say not clean. I am clean, but I'm not sitting there putting gloves on and being pristine about everything. And ultimately, as far as like setting hides, I have, quite frankly, I've had other people put those hides out or tell me, where would you like to put the hide today? And then let them set the hide. So I will say it depends again on who's the class first, I guess.
Yes.
Right. Because if I've got an older class, which is what I majority have right now, so those things that I'm talking about are for sure available to an older class. Now, if you're talking about a younger class, a newer class, again, I'm not putting on gloves to go set hides, but that being said, I might be a little bit more pristine about how I'm setting a hide because I want that odor picture to be appropriate for the dog, right? But as they start to become aged in the sport, that odor profile might become a little bit more, you know, disconnected in comparison, right? Because that's what you're going to see in a trial environment. And I'm sure, like most of you, we're also training in facilities where we're not the only instructor, right?
Absolutely.
So ultimately, guess what? That profile, that picture these dogs are experiencing every single week is always going to be contaminated as a result of that, right? No matter what we do. In fact, I can remember one time I set up a search and these dogs just kept hitting on, and Jeremy, I know you know this, in Flint Creek, they have it's in a horse barn, an old horse barn. And an instructor had stuck a hide on the frontward facing of one of the stalls. Well, the hide was gone. Any little piece that was connected to the hide was gone. But because it had been there the night before, guess what? The dogs are hitting on the wood because there's residual of what just happened the night before, probably 8-10 hours later. And they're like, that is the closest thing to source that I can find. So I'm going to hit on this. And I'm going, there is nothing there. But, again, it's been used within the last 8 to 10 hours. So the dogs are going to put some kind of effort towards it. Right. So not completely clean, especially in the training area. But I think that's appropriate because not every condition, especially when you look at AKC, CPE, UKC, CWAGs, those are not clean environments. In fact, some NACSW environments haven't been nearly as clean where they have found rogue hides, which is interesting because they have a very strict 6 months odor can't be on the property, right? Situation. You have to train for it.
And I've said it 1,000 times that the real world's not sterile, and the
Yes.
folks that want to treat it like it's nuclear waste, I mean, you're just never going to experience that, right? So, you know, now just like you said with puppies, if we're starting a young dog, absolutely, we're going to have a little bit more controlled environment. But you know, I like to, also early on when I am working dogs, very early, I start proofing dogs off of stuff. Day one, I'm proofing them off of, almost day one. When I'm allowing them to make a choice between odor and the food, they're getting proofed off of that food and understanding that's what pays. So early on the process, we're going to have the food involved. We're going to have a bunch of stuff involved. Because what is it that typically hinders people at trials? You know, uh, there's this novel odor out there, whether it's wild weenies or it's 2 weeks ago we had an area where we literally had deer poop and acorns and everything else. So you're never, when you go to these CPE trials, especially CPE and AKC, there's no telling, and they'll use the same place over and over, and sometimes it'll be places in which they train. So it's one of those things where you prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Oh, yes.
Let's see here. Jill Darla, Bill Morgan. Hello from Bill and Magnus. Had a great time training with you in Pennsylvania. Oh, we had a workshop in Pennsylvania. Let me see if this guy had a question from a guy named Roger Brumley, but he said, if any of you train service dogs, I'd like to ask a question. I don't know if he's still on, but I told him go ahead and ask. I'm going to check these other forums to make sure we haven't missed anybody. And just in case we did, somebody wasn't able to, because I noticed that we had one lady, Allison, said the link's not working, and we reposted it. This will be available to watch. YouTube has a really nice feature where it will, once it goes into the live, it will save it, so you can always go to the channel and rewatch under lives. All right, Diane Gossett, are there certain breeds that make better Scentwork dogs? And if so, what qualities make them better?
I'm going to talk to that, and as someone who has a non-traditional breed, I absolutely think that any breed any dog is absolutely able to do detection work.
Yeah.
As long as you support them, um, you don't need to select a breed for detection. Just take the dog in front of you. I'm sorry, my dog is playing with toys at this point. But as someone who has achieved higher levels with a French bulldog in detection sports, you do not need a specific dog in any level. Take the dog in front of you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely.
Not me. Sorry. It depends. Do you want, are you patient? Do you have lots of time to bring up a non-traditional breed with very low drive and you're good with that? I mean, I coach everything, every breed, but there's some people that come in and they've already frustrating dog and they've already done the project dog. And now they're ready to take everything that they've learned and have a dog with maybe higher arousal or higher drive. And they ask me, what should I get? Look for performance in the parents' backgrounds when you're choosing a puppy. Whatever breed turns you on. I would not look for just a dog that's got breed ring background. I would look for a dog that's got performance in its lineage, because that is going to come down the line genetically and make your life easier.
Well, and I think it depends on.
Well, I mean,
It
I'm
depends
going
on
to
your
agree.
goals, right? It depends on your goals. Because if your goal is to just enjoy the sport, then you don't need to get to that level of detail. But if your intention is to go and compete at big levels and at big events, yeah, then you're going to want to look for a dog that can handle competing and the work it takes to get to that level and to ultimately try to win.
I coach all those people. I coach the hobbyist, and then I coach the people that want to go all the way. And we try to help when they make their puppy decisions.
I mean, I don't think we can absolutely discount the non-traditional breeds
at all
to be competitive. I mean, that's just my.
Oh yeah,
but I mean, in the lineage, the non-traditional breed, look for non-traditional breeders who have performance in the line. Does the dog know how to move? Can the dog move? Structurally, can it move? You know,
how
structurally,
confident
can it handle
is the
Texas
dog as
heat?
well?
Well, yeah, confidence is
you know, down here in the middle of winter, we can have 90-degree days, 95-degree days in fall. You know, so you need to find a dog that can make it where you live. You know.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm really gonna agree with Carolyn on this one. However, and I train everything from the Papillon to, you know, we've got and Monique, you may have met her. Oh, that's a dog. I thought for a split second she had a pet monkey pop up on the screen. I was like, whoa, she's got a monkey. So now they are a herding breed, but I absolutely love watching corgis work. And I've got a pet corgi, and I would almost do scent work with her, but I like her to lay on the couch and just cuddle, right? I'm going to be more like Carolyn. I'm going to look for a dog that's genetically proven. So like I have a dog now. I have two things I'm going to do with her as a puppy. We're going to do IGP and nose work. That's it. And what we are setting up is as we even in the future when we breed, we are going to breed that dog that can go to a home where they can do whatever they want to sport wise with the dog. So as I even talk to her breeder and some of the people in our club, I'm saying, hey, look, it's not a bad idea to put some nose work titles on these dogs so people see them and say, hey, look, I'm looking for a dog. This is what I want to do. Because when I test a dog, when I tested this whole litter of puppies, I looked at the dog and I said, well, that's really the dog I'm leaning to. And it wasn't even the most high drive dog at that time. A lot has come out because you have to trust genetics. But what she had for detection is what I wanted, right? I am going to tend to go with the Shepherd's Mals or Labs or German short hair pointers. I like the high drive dogs that can go and go and go. Now, if I lived out in Texas where the heat is, Labs, I mean, hold on, Shepherds and Mals, they are going to gas out. They won't admit it, but Shepherds and Mals will gas out. If I'm working in extreme heat, I'm probably going to go with something like a German short hair pointer or a lab that's going to have a little bit more juice in it. But there was actually a study done a couple years back where they tested non-traditional breeds and traditional breeds, and they found that the flat-nosed dogs actually picked up on the odor faster. However, the hindrance was that the dog, it didn't have the stamina, right? So I would say for most people, go with the dog in front of you, go with what makes you happy. Now, if I want to be serious about competing, I want to look at a couple things. One, if I'm buying a puppy, I want to look at the parents. I want to look at their pedigree. I want to see what they've been titled in. Obviously, performance. I look for like IGP, the Schutzen style dogs. But then I'm also going to test those dogs, because I want to see that hunt drive. I want to see, and I want to see a dog that's environmentally confident. Too many dogs fail scent work because they're environmentally sensitive. And I've worked with a lot of clients on building confidence in their dogs. If you look at, and she's probably watching, but there's a dog named Archer that 2 years ago it wouldn't even walk into a room without shutting down. I think Monique, you've judged Archer recently, and what we have done in 2 years, he looked amazing 2 weeks ago. I had to give her a high five and tell her I was proud of her. But where he started and where he is now, I commend her. I commend Shelly for the amount of work she's put into this dog. You know, um, but it's just like Carolyn said. But if you have like your starter dog and then you have another dog, probably by your third dog, you're thinking about real high level competition. Then I would go for the more performance based, unless I'm just a breed specific person. But I'm gonna be like Carolyn here. I'm gonna stick with labs, GSPs, shepherds, and males. And for me, you're gonna see me with more shepherds, maybe a male here and there. But we're trying to breed nice working line shepherds that my focus is on detection, but also, the ability to do all phases, tracking, apprehension, obedience. But we want social, we want confident, and that's important too. Because if you research the pedigree, like she said, and you see the parents and you study, you're also going to get performance without reactivity. And just because a breed is popular doesn't mean you should go anywhere and buy a Malinois. You know, um, because we see a lot of very highly reactive, nervous Malinois that aren't representative of what the breed. And people will bash me on this one, but you know, if you want a Ferrari, you go to the Ferrari dealership. You don't go to the Fiat lot and put ground effects on it and put a Ferrari badge on it. Just doesn't work.
Well,
It's like when we
and
was
if
in
you
high
can't
school.
handle a Ferrari, don't go in the Ferrari parking lot.
That's right. That's like when we was in high school. You had the guys that had the four-cylinder Mustang, but they would stick the 5.0 sticker on the side, and we knew it wasn't a 5.0, you know? All right, let's see if we have any more questions before we wrap up here.
Do you have a observation and quote unquote question for all of the experienced judges? How do you feel about the current buried um
The Rural
the
Tames?
current buried things? So I will give you my observations. I think it has been advantageous for the buried sand I will tell you that I think the buried water has dissipated very quickly, and I don't know where the odor is going. Um, from the beginning to the end of a buried water, especially anise, I I'm very concerned as where the odor is going because I think that the odor has been very diffuse and not available.
So
So
we worked
as
buried
far as
today. We worked buried today in class. So I had 33 people come through buried today. And I lifted by myself. So it was great that it was lighter, but I am seeing problems with not the lower levels, but the upper levels when I
higher levels,
create
yeah.
convergences. And we had wind today. So when I made water convergences, I made a huge mess. It was a huge mess.
Yeah,
I
I think water. I mean, Carolyn, my biggest concern is water at this point. I
agree.
feel like um, I don't know where the odor is going, but the buried water is problematic.
It's getting heavily
The
diluted, is what you're saying.
Well,
Yes,
here's something else I don't think people might realize is happening, but I've seen it both times that I've set it up under the new rules without any kind of vessel to hold it. So the way I set it up before is I would suction cup, load my swab into the airline tubing with a gloved hand, set it into the suction cup, then pour water on it. So now it's toss the swab in with no vessel and hope that
yes.
it's. But what I noticed is I tossed it in, I lifted up the container, and as I'm walking to place it where I want to stage it, that swab has not sunk yet, and it's hitting the side of the plastic with oil all over it. So
Well,
it's
and that's
there's
my
oil,
problem. I don't know where that odor is going.
and then
I
it
literally
finally
don't know where
sinks.
the odor is going. And from the beginning to the end of the day, I see odor not available, especially for anise. Um, but where's the odor going? That's my biggest concern is where's the odor, where's all of that oil going? Because
I
I have
I worry that no data was collected at all before the decision. The
I mean,
decision was based on people complaining about weight, and it was a decision to appease the people who were complaining about the weight of the containers, but no data was collected to demonstrate a result of that decision before it was made.
and honestly, the sand issue has been is not the sand has been not as problematic as the water. So throwing a a scented Q-tip into the water at the beginning of the day, um, I see at the end of the day throwing a scented Q-tip into the water, um, that odor is not available, and I don't know where that odor is going.
It's
Um,
evaporating.
well, it's evaporating, but where is it going to, Jeremy? I mean, where is it going? And as, specifically for anise, I mean, I will say for anise. So from if we throw an anise Q-tip into water at the beginning of the day,
Hmm.
5 6 hours later, it's very 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 weak for dogs.
Yep.
Is it just evaporating? Is it going into the plastic of that buried container? I mean, we don't know where it's going, and I have a lot of concerns about that.
Well, and also, what's
I
your
think it's
temperature?
getting so diluted by the end of the day, that because what I don't know what you guys have seen, but lower levels the dogs just blow through it. They've got no problem whatsoever. But when you get to the higher levels, yeah, that's when it becomes
Agree.
problematic.
Agree.
Throwing a Q-tip, I mean, honestly, throwing a Q-tip in the water has been problematic for the higher levels. I don't know where the odor is going. I think it's not available to dogs after a certain amount of time.
Well, and what's the other problem is anise and temperature, right?
Well, and
Of
that's not a
course.
problem here. I mean, today we were
Well,
81, so it was
right,
warm.
right.
And most of our trials down here, I mean, it'll get cold in February. That's it. That's all you get. And so we don't have that problem with it suppressing because of temperature. But you know, I'm just a big believer in exposure, and the even though I think they're problematic, I think the more that we expose our teams to the new setup, the dog has the responsibility of figuring it out.
Yeah, but I do
And
feel like,
just like
I mean, honestly, throwing a blank, a Q-tip with, okay, so I will give you an example. I'm taking a Q-tip with the AKC amount of anise and I'm throwing it in a water tub. And then 8 hours later, I am not seeing that that odor is available to teams. I'm not seeing that.
I guess because I'm in a warmer climate, I'm just not experiencing that. So, I mean, I have some complaints about it, but nothing extreme enough to make me take action on it. But again, we haven't hit the cold months here yet either. I might have a
And I
different
haven't
opinion.
observed it in extreme
But
cold either.
my also concern is, where's that odor going? I mean, that's a lot of fucking odor. That's a lot of odor. And where's that odor going? Is it just evaporating? Where is it going? Because if I take a Q-tip and I throw it in water, and 6 hours later, teams can't recognize it, where's that odor going? Is it being absorbed by the plastic?
So welcome to AI's version of this, right? So it basically says,
Thank you, Monique.
You're welcome. It says that ultimately what will happen is that it'll cause a film on the water surface, limiting the scent to be diffused in the air. So what might be happening is both a combination of temperature plus the more it's sitting on the top, the more it's creating a barrier, and ultimately then not able to actually diffuse. And to your point on if it's touching the plastic, I'm wondering if the only way a dog that's consistently working on this particular complexity, right? Only way they can do it is if it does touch the plastic, right? Because then the plastic becomes your
Right.
right,
Absolutely.
right.
So here's my question, and let's go back to
And
what they
so,
say buried's supposed to represent, because all these are supposed to represent what a professional dog does. Why even mess with the Q-tip? That's your hot container. Why not just drop the oil in the water?
well, and so, I mean,
changes the color.
I mean,
It does
I
change the
gotta,
color.
I,
Gold
I
is
have
definitely
I
changes the
have to
color.
side with Monique at this point, because, like, we've trained our dogs on a specific thing, and dropping a Q-tip, a blank Q-tip with oil into the water is completely different from what we have trained previously. And I'm also really, really concerned about contamination, because
No,
there's
that's
lots of people that are not good about keeping things separate.
that was my huge complaint when the idea of buried, and I'm going to probably get slack on this one, but the idea that buried should be introduced as an option to replace vehicles in CPE. And I I'll 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 be honest to say I am, I've been able to get through buried, right, with many dogs. But I hate the idea that they've chosen buried even before when it was stick it in the ground and people lost where their damn hives were, right?
I
Like
prefer to stick it in the ground, though. I mean, that's more realistic.
I mean,
yeah.
Monique, I've gotten through buried. I've gotten through buried master with a French bulldog, so
Yes.
I'm on your side at this point.
Yes. Well, and I get what you're saying too, Jeremy, of like the stick it in the ground is more of what they were intended. But then the problem with that becomes, again, back to our original conversation too, is the environment with which we all live changes on whether or not you should be having your dog sitting there sniffing the ground too, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
so it's kind of like what was the real choice? And I guess the intent was to get rid of the vehicle search, and quite frankly, my personal opinion is bring that back into play, and if you want to continue to have buried, then let the competitor choose whether or not they're going to join your trial because you got buried or join your trial because you've got vehicle. And I pretty much can guarantee you most are going to want or prefer vehicle over buried, at least around here,
Well,
right?
they
Well,
sent out several
and like
years
the
ago.
reality is that like the original intent of quote unquote buried,
Yeah,
like we don't want our dogs sniffling in soil that could be contaminated with pathogens,
right.
which is
But that's what
problematic.
they
And
naturally
let's be
do.
real. I mean, let's be real. The current AKC buried is an artificial setup, and that's fine. But let's all recognize that this setup is artificial, and the current dropping the Q-tip with oil into the bin, like I frankly am concerned, where is that oil going? And if people are not being very good about their odor hygiene, I have a big problem with that.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
100%, right? I
Yeah.
mean, Monique, like, like from a trial standpoint, if you're like, people need to 100% be aware of what is hot and cold at this point, because when I drop a scented Q-tip, I don't know where that oil is going. I feel like it's getting absolutely absorbed by all of that that plastic.
Oh,
Well,
100%.
the one thing I would say is probably don't overthink it, because every time they do a test on these dogs, they find that these dogs can smell sometimes at parts per billion, is what they're saying now. So
Well,
I believe at the end of the day, the dog can find the because I've watched teams successfully do it at the higher levels at the end of the day with problematic weather. However, I think it breaks down to people hate buried and they just don't train it. And buried is
well,
one of those things where the odor presents a little bit differently. So if you have a good training group, you're going to have it in gravel, you're going to have it in grass, you're going to
Well,
have it,
yeah,
off the side of a
I don't,
building. You're going to have it in multiple setups.
like,
it's not
Jeremy,
that I
I
think
don't
Lori's fighting.
disagree with you. However, I will say that it becomes problematic when people mix in, um,
Previously used.
absolutely.
Yes.
So
So
when I 100% agree with you. I know that dogs can absolutely recognize odor.
Yeah.
The problem is clubs that are not odor hygienic, and they have tubs that have been previously utilized with odor intermixed. And Monique, you know what, is absolutely, I see her nodding her head here.
I've seen it. I've
Yeah,
literally had to fight that.
absolutely. Clubs that have tubs that are intermixed with previously hot and previously cold, and then do not separate appropriately. And so dogs are going into a test in a trial where there are tubs that have previously been hot. So that's a gray area for that dog. And honestly, that's not fair to that dog.
No.
And the problem may happen in transport. They may store them separately, but if they put them all in whoever's car that person's going to take buried over, the problem may happen in transport.
Absolutely. And this is where I
1,000%.
think Monique and I have been very vocal about the odor hygiene needs to be very, very clear.
Yeah.
And this is something that Monique and I have said from, day one. If the AKC wants to continue with buried, odor hygiene needs to be a primary concern.
Yep.
Well, and I think
if you can't get it together, then the club needs to throw away their buried hot after every trial. Replace the hot.
Absolutely.
Not just hot,
You
though.
cannot keep yourself straight. Throw it away.
And not just hot, though, right? Because here's the thing. There is contamination even happening during.
Uh-oh.
well, we lost her for a second.
We lost Monique.
She'll be back.
But
Here
yes,
we've got a comment. Val Grant. Clubs would rather host vehicles over buried. And does the Q-tip stay afloat or eventually sink? I haven't trained or tried it yet. Well, yeah, it eventually sinks. The ones I have,
I have always the Q-tip has always synced at some point for me.
Yeah,
that hasn't been an issue.
Yeah.
It
But do you remember?
Clove also turns the water yellow.
Do you remember? Probably about 5 years ago, they sent an email out to all the AKC judges, and they were going to make a change, and they asked what people would rather see instead of buried, and vehicles was one of them. And overwhelmingly, I know everybody that I knew that was a judge voted for vehicles. But I'm not making the decision.
Problem with vehicles. I mean,
there's problems with vehicles too.
I mean, even NACSW has issues with getting people to volunteer their vehicles because people don't want dogs scratching up their vehicles, and I can understand that.
It's not a problem at Monique's club. First time I judged there, I asked them if they really wanted me to take the keys to. There was some. I looked at some of these folks. I had the crappiest car in the lineup.
I will say that there are. Okay, let me preface this.
I think it was your husband. He goes, "That's just a car."
So CPE has vehicles, and I have judged CPE, and I have been absolutely blessed with judging CPE and the volunteers and people volunteering their vehicles. So I really do feel like vehicles are a viable option, and there are a lot of CPE clubs out there that are doing vehicles at the higher levels that have people that are able to volunteer their vehicles for searches. And I absolutely appreciate that. I think the AKC hesitancy is, I mean, I don't know. At this point in time, I really do feel like it's just a fucking.
Tell us how you really feel.
I feel like it's just like the AKC is saying, like, we're not going to do vehicles because everybody else is doing it.
Right.
Yeah, they wouldn't be different.
I mean, I have worked with a lot of CPE clubs, and I mean, Monique, as someone who is a very involved CPE competitor, I've gone to judge for CPE trials, and I have not had a problem getting vehicles.
No,
I literally have not.
No, none at all. No,
and those people have been very thoughtful, and the competitors have been very thoughtful. And I'm very grateful for the people who have given their vehicles. But at this point in time, I feel like the AKC opposition to vehicles is because out of absolutely just because we don't want to.
It doesn't have to be vehicles. I just don't think maybe
I
they've
mean, it
thought
could
hard
be
about
anything,
enough about
honestly,
what
at
it
this
could
point.
be. It could be anything, so one day we had a conversation about if it's not buried and it's not vehicles, what could it be? What about a wind exercise where there's differences that increase and there is a 10
Or
toss
distance. I mean,
and
or
can the dog
distance challenge. I
Independent
mean,
searching.
or where you
Yeah.
I
don't,
love
you're
open
not
area
allowed in the
searches.
search area for that. The dog enters the search field, you don't, something like
Mhm.
that. I think out of the side of the box. It doesn't have to be vehicles. What else can we come
One
up
of
with?
one of the
I
most
mean, it
popular things.
absolutely doesn't need to be vehicles. I mean, there's distance challenges. There's 100 things that we could do besides buried.
Agree.
Well, I mean, Randy Harris hosted a scramble at a local law enforcement event for years, and it's like a 40 by 40 area with three really strong distractions placed out there and the target odor, and you turn the dog loose and you stand at the start line and you can't do anything but let the
I
dog
love
work.
that. That's
And it's
awesome.
fun. People love it. And when I say strong distractions, he'll put out a big container full of cat poop, you know, and he'll have another big thing of dog food. So they have to work through it, and they have to work independently. And people love it. People sign up for it, and they come from all over. So something like that would be fun. I actually brought that up to CPE doing like an open area search and having like maybe 4 distraction area odors and 1 target odor in an area. And they didn't appreciate my comment. They said it would be problematic getting an area that was safe. And I'm like, most of these clubs can find a baseball field, or like you've got, Monique, you've got that one little area that's fenced in off to the side that we run exteriors on. You can make something work. And I said, you don't even have to make it part of your normal lineup. Make it something that's just for fun, maybe an additional, title you could do. Like they have non-traditional vehicles. Why not have like an open area search?
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, the thing that bothers me about buried is that it's a unique concept to a container search, right? And it's a next level container search. So if that's what you're looking for, it's just a next level container search. There's so many other things, and quite frankly, I would say if you were asking most competitors, would love to do a poll on this. What is your most favorite of all the elements, favorite element? What is your least favorite element, right?
Yeah, but I feel like to be fair, Monique, like buried is a container search, but it's not actually a container search.
Right. It's a next level container search.
Right.
It's got a component to it that is different than a traditional box, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So definitely it adds a completely different level of challenge to a container search, but at the end of the day, when the dog looks at it, they're just seeing a bunch of boxes.
Absolutely. And here's my personal issue with buried is that the conditions of a buried search can't be replicated in training so that it is able to be trained for every team.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, I had one buried search just to give context, hence the point on temperature. February in Chicago, right? Low temperatures. We had to be in the cars with our heat on. And where did they put the buried search? Everything was inside a building. So you're thinking, okay, great. It's a temperature controlled building. They had the back half of the building had interiors. The back right half had containers, but right next to the gosh darn door was what? The
Buried.
buried search. I'm going, you are not intelligent because this is, you open the door and it's just wind, and it's
Absolutely.
cold wind, right? So there's so many elements to this that you've now made already challenging concept far more challenging on top of it. And I get it, right?
No,
But you can't train for 20-degree weather with high intensity of wind and snow.
no. And I feel like, I mean, Monique, to talk to your point, I feel like there are many of us who understand that we need to train for very other circumstances, but it's not we are not able to train for the variability in the buried element that has been introduced as such with the AKC.
Yes.
Well, and that, so that kind of what we're talking about kind of brings us up to a question, because Jerry Martin just asked that question. When you have wind in the buried search area, how do you work to the source, because scent is everywhere?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah,
So, you know,
it's everywhere.
ideally is 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 buried perfect? No, it's not perfect, but
No,
it's
it's not, but
right
we
now they're
got to
not
work
doing
with
away
that.
with it, and it's something we're going to have to try to train and try to duplicate and try to let our dogs see those pictures as much as possible. And you know, once again, it takes me back to my notes. If I see something in a trial and I'm like, oh man, I was in Chicago and they were literally jabbing a stick down there to bust the ice. I've never been anywhere where the water's frozen, but I'm pretty sure there's been trials where it's frozen, right?
Mm.
You don't know till you know, you know? I mean, uh, we try to
I
train and
mean,
prepare for the absolutely worst case scenario, but sometimes Mother Nature throws things at us and we just have to get through it.
I
Yeah.
mean, for my personal, as someone who has a non-traditional breed, who is not high drive, for training in any scenario with buried, I always want my dog to understand that they need to check the complete surface of the buried bin before
Correct.
moving on. And the way that I personally do that, and I know Jeremy, this is not something that you advise. Um, I do actually pair. I actually do pair with source in the buried bin, so that the dog understands that pairing with the source requires them to uh, kind of circulate across the bin.
Mhm,
Um, and that's how I do it. And,
mhm.
and I know that every dog is different. Um, but the way that I get my dog to work through blowing and converging is that when I move into buried, my expectation is that my dog examines the buried bin um, across the entire surface before they make a decision. So they go in and they sniff not only the side, but they make the kind of sniff the entire surface and then make a decision. And the way that I get them to do that, I personally get that for my dog with pairing the odor with source at underneath the grid. But I know that, you know, obviously there's other people that have other ways that they do that, but
I think one thing that helps is what we teach down here for containers and buried is a protocol, which means you start at the first available container and you check every single one. There's no skipping and there's no blowing over. And so when we were talking about the AI version of, or the AI answer to the being sealed by the oil, if that dog has its nose down on every container, there's a high likelihood that when it gets to the one that we're talking about with the AI answer, that it will encounter odor because the nose has dropped to the grate instead of odor having to leave the container and blasting out and the dog finding it from afar.
Hmm.
So we treat containers like a TSA exercise, meaning you're down and your nose is going to check every one of them before you're done. This also helps me with maybe older handlers who have issues remembering where they've been. So we're not going back. We're not having to repeat containers. We're not having to go again. We go once and call finish, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah. Checking the seams, and then that's the same way in containers. You know, when you've got that dog that's methodical and works that seam line, you see a lot less issues. But you know, with us that have the high drive dogs, getting that nice methodical pattern is oftentimes one of our biggest challenges.
Well,
Whereas, you know, you see when you see what I've noticed as a judge, you see somebody with the smaller dogs that are a little bit lower drive. Um, they typically do better in containers and buried because they're slower and they're checking each one out. They're spending more time there. Whereas, you know, you've got my dog in the past, he was just shot out of a cannon and he would stir it up and then, you know, settle in. But
but I think that approach has its place, right? It's very good for probably buried, right? Because buried, you can't, there's only so many, right? And it's
mhm,
usually in some kind of pattern, right?
mhm.
But when you suddenly get into NACSW elites or summit trials, those containers are not in a pattern. They're
Yeah.
not in a pattern. You have a dog that's going to methodically check all of them, you're wasting time. So again, I think it's a place, right? There's definitely a place for it, right? Um, but I force the dog to know what the job is and to
Well,
be
I
able
think
to
it's
get
about balance. Like, can you
right.
get a dog that's checking everything and still have your speed?
Yeah,
Well, it depends on the dog.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
some dogs that are so methodical and so slow, it's like watching paint dry. And me
exactly.
personally, I wouldn't own that type of dog, you know? But if I can get my dog's nose down and it's do 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 and it's at the good pace that I want, then I'm going to be happy with it.
Right, but you're not going to get every competitor dog to do that, right?
Right, right. No.
And so as a result, to require that, I definitely see the place for it, right? I see the place for it. But I wouldn't necessarily be a requirement of every team to do it in that fashion because the French Bulldog, as an example, right, is not necessarily, not to say they're not fast, right? But if they can make quick decisions on the pattern, you're going to get a higher time, quicker decisions, quicker outcomes, still with that testing of the seam. But if they're noticing that as they're going down that first line or whatever it is, that I'm not getting anything down this line. I need to make a veer because guess what? Mass amount of odor is over to the left. I'm letting the dog go left, right?
Yeah.
Because if I continue to go forward, I've now wasted a very large amount of time going down a line that probably doesn't even have odor on it.
Well, and the other thing when if we're talking containers is that we see in NACSW and people just don't work in their practice goes back to blanks. You know, people expect there to be odor out there, and in NACSW you can have a container search that has no odor.
Yes.
So, you know, those are things we should practice and training. You know, in
I'd
training,
say
once again, it's one of those
so.
things where it's so important to make notes of what we've been doing to make sure that we're one not repeating the same thing over and over, and to make sure that we are truly preparing for what we could see at a trial.
Oh yeah. Well, and again, it has its place, right? So if there is a way to conduct it in a way that is strategic, you can go ahead and do that. If it is chaos, and dear goodness, I should show you the one where I did it at Chicago, the White Sox Stadium, where there was no concept and there was a giant fence in between two subsets of the search. You'd see there isn't necessarily a pattern to follow.
Yeah.
It's essentially let the dog do the search, and quite frankly, every container was the exact same container, so not one was variant. They were all the ORT boxes.
Okay.
So being able to keep connection to what was going on in that search even became more obnoxious, right? So, again, it's up to the handler on what their preference, what they are able to handle mentally. It's up to you as well as your dog. What can your dog handle mentally? And as far as the stress of being able to go and do a search on a bunch of boxes that are blank, right?
Yeah.
Before it comes back into catching odor again. So I will tell you, all four of my dogs do all four different searches. Same exact search. They're going to operate that, even though three of them are Aussies, they're all going to operate it the way they're going to operate it. I'm not dictating that for them.
Absolutely.
Well, and
We do have a question from Val. It says clubs would rather host vehicles over buried. Does the Q-tip stay afloat or do eventually it sink? I haven't trained or trialed it yet.
yeah, we mentioned that one earlier. They do sink. They'll swell up and
Yes.
sink. And then there's
In
one
my
from
experience, they have sink. The Q-tips do sink.
yeah, and by the end of the day, they're about twice the size that they were when we dropped them in. Um, and then there's one here by Jerry Martin. When you have spread out and no pattern, then you chunk different sections, and this can go quickly.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, at this point, you have to you have to trust your dog at this point and work the boxes that are in front of you.
Yep. It's again based on preference, right? So how do you
Absolutely.
expect to conduct the search? How have you trained your dog to conduct that search? And are you doing it independently? Are you doing it based on a specific flow? And a lot of dogs, they'll pick up the projection forward, right? Or projection to the left and stay on a pattern. They won't necessarily veer off.
Absolutely.
But if you've got chaos, like you said about a cluster, you're going to have ping ponging.
But and that's where I like to have a dog that's confident and can work independently, because if it's
Yes.
chaos, that's where I'm going to trust my dog.
Yep.
And it's
Exactly.
like one of those things where yes, when we're training new handlers, um, one of the first things I ever learned when I had my first dog and they were teaching us how to search a vehicle,
No,
he said, "Hey, look, if we're going to ideally do it this way, but if you're walking and your dog starts dragging you to that vehicle or dragging you to the woods beside of it, go with the dog, because they
Yes.
could have tossed something out the window. So it falls back on trusting your dog
100%.
and building that dog is confident. Some of these dogs, there's clarity issues. Not it's getting better. So the sport of scent work's getting so much better than it was just say 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, right? But you still see these
Absolutely.
dogs that are so handler dependent that they're not actively searching. They're just coming out and healing in the search area.
Yeah.
So, I always tell my clients, from day one, we want that dog that's confident and can search independent and understand that, hey, look, I'm going to be out here doing this, and I just need minimal input from you.
Great.
Let's see here. See if we have any more questions. I don't see any more. Just double check here.
I just want to thank Carolyn for coming and being a guest.
Yeah, it's almost like having a celebrity guest, isn't it?
Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah, thank you for joining.
Thanks, y'all. It was fun. Thank you.
I've got a question. Carolyn. How many
Oh,
trials
no.
have you judged?
100 AKC trials, 196 AKC trials. A bunch.
Yeah. That's what I said. It's almost like having a celebrity when we
Thank you,
bring her in.
Carolyn, for coming
I've got.
on here.
Thank you. This year I've been way more picky. I do more competing with my dog than judging. It has to be a club I love, a destination I love, or that kind of thing. So this year's been more about
and that's the
competing
other.
with the lab.
Monique, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Lori.
Thank you
And that's
for
when it gets
trusting
hard,
me.
with that schedule. You're either judging or you're competing, but I find it's difficult to do both.
Yes,
Yeah, it
absolutely.
can be.
But I do want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank everybody for submitting the questions, and thank you for the Scentwork Texas group for asking me
Thank
to
you, Jeremy. Thank you,
to.
Monique. Thank you, Monique.
Thanks, y'all.
Yep. You guys have a wonderful
so
rest of your
much.
night.
Thank you,
both.
Carolyn.
Bye-bye.
All right.
All
Talk to you
right.
later.
Bye, guys.
And this will be available for replay. So we'll just end that there. And thank you, everybody, for submitting the questions. And we will see you next month.
Sounds good. Bye.
Bye.